Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a big ol' compilation or marathon of the last 8 days of me conquering my works in progress. I thought I'd greet you at the start with Una Shelby again, and her new hairdo, and the reminder to boil wash your dolls if you want the curls to stay. Sit down, grab a drink, grab a snack, maybe grab your own works in progress and finish them while you watch this. I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you at the end for a big old group picture of all of the finished projects. See ya! Before I show the footage I took, I'm going to catch you up to speed. This Deuce Gorgon came to me in the Ghoul Spirit set, which I mistakenly received 2 from, but got to keep. And for a long time, all I did was take off the face stripes, the cheek stripes. I'll see if I can find a picture for that. And then at some point I decided I wanted to repaint all of the core ghouls that I had. So, on top of that, I made him a pair of pants. I cut out some paper pieces to give you an idea of how did that function. I don't think this is a part of this. So we have a waistband that I added elastic to, 2 pieces for the legs, for the back of the legs, and 2 pieces for the front of the leg. So that would come together like this. Then there, of course, there was a piece for the ankle, and I had this little cutout piece so that I could put a pocket behind it and have an actual functional pocket. And then I also had these 2 pieces, which also, if I can pick them up, which also sewn together like this, and then about here on the leg made another pocket. Aside from that, I also made him a sweater, which I painted his squelette onto with 1 front piece, 2 back pieces, 2 back pieces, a sleeve piece, a wrist piece, a piece for the waist, and 2 hood pieces, and then Velcro for the seam in the back. These are all done with approximate measurements. I don't often measure, which means that the pieces often end up fitting a little silly, but I don't really care about that. And then lastly, what you'll see when the footage starts, this is my crude drawing of Deuce's face, is that he has little vague eyebrows, and I think he looked about like this. So that's what you're gonna start with. This was just because I'd already tried to repaint him once and thought his eyes were too low down, and I did not like that. So I drew some reference points for myself. Also, thanks for ignoring the very stained table. And let's finally start with the footage of work in progress number 1, Faceless Deuce. I'm adding white, lemon yellow, Prussian blue, black, and some Liquitex matte medium on my palette. And then with quite a wet brush, I am mixing some yellow and adding my first layer onto his sclera. He doesn't really have irises because I tried to paint him with irises once and I couldn't get it to look right. Next, I'm going in with a bit of a murky green to paint his eyebrows, and then a darker green to add some texture. I wanted his eyebrows to look quite bushy, and I find that you get things to look bushier with adding more texture and layers and different colors. I went in again to cover his eyes up with yellow, and then went in on his lips with quite a murky green that I think is almost exactly the same color as his original lips. So that's a bit silly. However, I do think I changed the shape of his lips a bit. Then I'm using that same color to paint in his eyelids and try and give his face sculpt some dimension. I wanted his eyes to look a bit sunken and deep, but then to make sure that his eyes didn't look messy, I also mixed a color as close to his skin tone as possible to redefine the shape of his eyebrows and the shape of his eyelids, and just go in and clean it up. And then you can see I kind of tap it with the finger to blend it out. I'm defining his upper eyelid some and also the edges on his other side. I work back and forth from one side to the other to make sure that I have an easier time with symmetry and really keep cross-referencing and jumping back and forth. You can see I'm also adding lower eyelids and defining the tail of his eyebrow. His eyebrows are quite short and stocky, but I feel like that also helps with the bushy look. And then you can see at the front of the eyebrow, I'm adding some lighter and some darker strokes just to really add to that hair texture, and adding some tiny hairs at the tail of his eyebrows. And then I am taking, I don't know, I think, yeah, now I'm taking quite a dark green, but not a black just yet, to define his eyelashes and his eyeline. I'm using a teeny tiny brush for this and using really short strokes to try and keep the line as short as possible. Apologies for me stumbling over my words. I find voiceovers really quite hard, but I'm doing it. Next, I'm still defining his upper eyelid, and then here I'm going in with the pupils. I find slit pupils kind of tricky. I find I have to go back quite a couple times to really make sure it's sharp, and that's what I'm doing here with some yellow mixed with white to really define it. I'm also trying to sharpen the upper eyelid and really going in with really small strokes. I think here I'm adding a bit of the lighter color also to his inner corners, and then now I'm not sure, but I'm going in with black now to really define it and add some depth where I feel it's needed. Now here I'm getting too impatient. I'm adding the eye whites, or not the eye whites, the highlights. And I think, am I adding highlights also to the inner corners? I guess I am. And now we're already going in with gloss. You wouldn't know it watching the video, but it's actually only been a couple minutes. Okay, now we're going back to the eyebrows, adding some texture to the tail. I think here I just had to wipe off the gloss because I put the gloss on too soon after the eye whites and it blurred a bit. And here is the final result. I quite like his face. I think he looks cheeky. The highlights did end up mixing a bit with the glaze, the gloss, because I was impatient, but I don't even think it looks that bad. I like to pretend he's wearing contacts so that I don't have to put sunglasses on him, because all the sunglasses look crooked with the snakes. I like his eyebrows quite a lot. This looks very textured because this fabric is reused from an old pair of my pants. And I wore them a lot before I decided to turn them into fabric for doll clothes. But I like the stripes. I like the stripe detail. Also, the hood does not fit over his head. He has a stain on his head. Let's fix that. I don't know how that got there, but it's gone now. Please ignore that his pants don't fit that well. Originally I made these pants for Torlai. I thought the yellow would look quite nice on her, but the green and the blue just didn't fit with her color palette, and they fit on Deuce, and I think the color scheme is alright for him. And then we have his original Ghoul Spirit shoes, which I have a pair that I cut the socks off of, but they actually just make him really floppy ankled. I think he needs this stabilization. Here you can see the working pockets. They are working, functional. I could put something in there if I had something to put in there. And there he is. At this point I quite like him. I might still sell him in the future, but I really like him, and I'm really glad that I was able to take him from a faceless doll that was just standing on my shelves to a doll that I feel accomplished with. Today we're going to be customizing this Winx doll. This Winx doll, I'd already nearly finished customizing it when I started recording, and mainly she needed shoes. So I took inspiration from Hexgen, who I think often uses pins as heels. And because this doll has such rubbery legs, it's quite easy to insert the pins right into the shoe rather than into the shoe base. And then I used some little balls of Milliput to secure the pin into the shoe and also already kind of build the heel of the shoe. I am using this little metal tool and some water to really smooth it down and secure the shape. And the thing is that I ended up sculpting quite blocky heels, even though the sturdiness of the pin would have allowed me to make pointier heels. I don't know why I chose to do that. I just kept going. I just kept kept working on it. And I found it quite hard to film the sculpting of the heels, so that's why you're watching me paint them now. I'm using a mix of white, fluorescent pink, and yellow to mix this color that is quite close to her hair color. And I made sure to mix enough water and medium into the paint to get a really nice consistency that went on smoothly and didn't leave too many brush strokes. And you can also see I'm going in quite thin layers. And then the other shoe, for some reason I picked two different colors. The other shoe is matching the kind of corally peachy pink that's on the flowers on the dress. And yeah, I mixed that with, I think, the same colors, just in different proportions. I wasn't exactly sure how to explain what steps that I took on this doll. As you can see, I sculpted her shoes on and I used the pin as a base. I used that bit of epoxy sculpt. I'll probably explain this in the video better. For her dress, you can see that there's a seam here. Let's put her arms up. There's a seam here, and there's a hole in the back. So this piece had a cut down the middle, and for the rest, I just kind of traced the shape of her front and back. This is a tiny little gathering stitch, and then these are just very gathered strips. There's 3 strips of them here. And those are sewn on. Then for her hair, I only rooted the part lines. Let's get her arms out of the way again. Oh, first for the dress, this is just gathered by a thick thread. You could do an embroidery thread. I just sewed it through. I started here and sewed it up in a zigzag motion, and then took the other end and also sewed that up in a zigzag motion, and then tied it at the top. Just to make a really easy closure. Her hair is rooted just around the edges and then braided. You can see how I grab little pieces and gather them, and her scalp is just painted pink. You can see how I haven't really rooted anything in there because her head is so small, and if I wanted to braid it, I'd have to really... You can see that the braid already turns out quite tight just by thoroughly rooting the edges and the part line, and then it's secured with thread. This doesn't look very neat, but it works. I tried to use the closest matching thread I had. Then for her face, I again used no black. This green, this like sagey green, is mixed by using an ultramarine blue and a lemon yellow. I think, or it might be also a warm toned yellow, but I used a blue and a yellow that leaned away from each other so that the green would be more desaturated. I think I used a fluorescent pink to mix her hair color, and then I mixed a darker color and a lighter color, and if you look closely, you can also see that like around her eyebrows and around her lashes, I mixed a color similar to her skin tone. I think I also did that at the little upper bits here, but I'm not 100% sure. For her lashes, I really did just paint her lashes a bit messily with this dark pink, and then cleaned it up with a small brush and the close to her skin tone color. And then I glossed her eyes and I glossed her lips. You can see on her cupid's bow I also cleaned up the shape a bit, And then I didn't know what color to paint her shoes, whether to match the pink on her dress or the pink of her hair. So I did one of each. Not sure how I feel about it, but she's finished. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll show you a final reveal too. But that's my detailing of how that I put her together. Thank you. And now we're going to customize a cave club girl into a changeling girl. First, I am taking apart this little baggie. I think a lot of products come with little bags like this, like little storage bags. And if you seam rip them apart, they are a very nice amount of fabric often to make doll clothes with. This one is going to turn into this doll's shorts. Now we're going to get to the face up. I'm grabbing my little brushes and grabbing rose violet, reddish yellow, a very nasty slimy Prussian blue, white, and my medium. I'm making sure to mix up the Prussian blue to get the medium all mixed in. The medium, the binder, and then I'm mixing a dark purple to sketch out the eye shape. This doll is a changeling girl in the way that old mythology talks about human children being stolen from their crib and being replaced with fairy children. And I know that the story has a complicated history, especially with neurodivergent people. I myself am neurodivergent and I quite like the story. And so that's also why I'm making a doll for it. I enjoy the idea that there is something mythical out there and that maybe as a baby I did get switched around and I'm a bit different. I don't know. I like embracing differences in such a way. And I'm trying to be quite lighthearted with it. If you want to read into this story of masking with her little rainbow high face mask, you're welcome to. If you want to just take it as a mythological doll, go ahead as well. Now I'm going to talk about what we missed. So I used some lighter colors and some darker colors to add texture to the eyebrows. I used a peachy color for the lips that I think looks quite nice with her warm skin tone. I'm not using any black in this face up, and her scleras are lilac because I wanted her to look a bit otherworldly. I wanted her to look unconventional and maybe a little off. I don't think she looks off. I just think she looks strange. I don't know. I gave her some freckles for visual interest, and whenever needed, I am mixing a color really close to her skin tone to fix up any mistakes or define any lines that I feel need defining. Her face is, or her second face, her mask, is Tessa Park from Rainbow High. You'll see bits and pieces of her through this whole series. I bought her for her clothes in the werewolf video. You'll see, I'm spoiling stuff. In the werewolf video, you see that I used her jacket for Claudine Wolf, which I show at the end. In the last video, you'll see where I used her knees, and then in one of the last videos, it might be the second to last one, you'll see that I used what I used the rest of her body for. Now back to the face up. I'm using a really light lilac to actually go over her eyelashes because I wanted her to look more mystical, and so I tried to match the light color on her eyelashes to her hair a bit more. And again, I'm going in with a skin tone color to define her eyelashes and sharpen the shape. Her eyebrows, I wanted them to look quite bushy. I wanted her to look a little wild. So that's why I went in quite often with lighter and darker colors to add more hairs and add more texture. Same with Deuce, kind of. And then I'm defining her lash line a little more. And now we're moving on to clothing. I didn't film a lot of this because it was just there wasn't a lot happening. This fabric is like an old child's shirt. And I'm just tracing out a rough shape, cutting it out, and then you'll see how that kind of fits. I'm making a bit of a bodysuit for her, and then I'm pushing this pen through the fabric to kind of transfer some dots so I can make a second piece, so I can sew them together along the armpit lines and the shoulders. And then we have a little bodysuit for her. Here you can see her mask and she looks quite silly with it. And the shorts I did not film. I really kind of struggled with the shorts because the fabric frayed a lot. And then her hair. Her hair I put in pipe cleaners, boil washed, and covered in this mixture of gel and curl cream, just like I did with Una. And then I let that dry thoroughly and took it out, and it worked really beautifully. And these curls haven't fallen out nearly as much as Una's have if you watch Deuce's video. So that's really great. The secret is boil washing. Boil wash your dolls. Learn my lesson. I did my experiment and I learned. I figured it out. Then, okay, I went and I separated all the curls. I guess I didn't show you. And now I'm just going in and trimming off all the scraggly little ends. Because this happens quite often where you just get a couple of rough little ends all over the place. So I'm just going around and grabbing all the straight pieces and cutting those off so that her hair just looks nice and curly. It still looks wild, but I don't even think that the straight bits look messy. They just look unintentional. And I want her to look intentionally messy. And at this point, I think you can also see just that the colors really do work. For this Cave Club girly, I think you got to see almost every part of the process, except for her hair. You got to see the hair curling, but for the rooting, I just quite tightly, neatly rooted her part line, and then you can see here it becomes a bit of a mess, but I just braided these, also secured these with thread. This is quite hard. I think I brushed gel onto it. Yeah. I brushed gel onto her braids to keep them together. And then, if we can move the mask out of the way again. In the front, this was going to be bangs. I think this is rooted to be bangs. However, I split them in half and then took pieces of hair from here and brought them over here. And did the opposite as well. You can see here that I actually accidentally cut into her face when cutting off the original hair, and so this little hairstyle is to hide that. This is also tied together with thread. Is that? And I guess I also bound some of her own hair around it here. I think so. I think this little piece of hair is wrapped around. I don't know if I did that on this side too. It's been quite a while since I did this. Yeah, but that's all. The little mask looks a bit silly because her hair gets in the way. So I think it's actually just cooler to just leave it up here. I just had this laying around and the color of the makeup matched so well. Don't ask why I had half of a rainbow high head laying around. Yeah. That's all. That's it. I think I bought this hair just because it was pretty, and then decided it looked nice against her skin tone. You don't need to have big creative ideas, but whenever I don't have big creative ideas and just go, I think this will look nice, that's when I have a lot of trouble getting a project done. So, customizing this werewolf girl based off of Monster High G1 Claudia. So this doll I went very far with. Inspired by Delightful, I tried to sculpt my own hinge joints. This was only like my second or third custom, and I just got very overwhelmed with it. So in the end, I decided to super glue the joints shut and cover them up with Milliput and just try and salvage what was there. So here you can see me kind of covering up the joints with Milliput, and I covered her toes with these little wolf paws, and then attaching them was really quite tricky, but I just went to it with Milliput and sanded it down as smoothly as I could get it. Next was attaching her head, so we're getting it soft in boiling water and squeezing it on, trying very hard not to damage the neck peg. I think her face is so cute. And here you can kind of see the legs. I didn't film too much of it because I'm not too proud of them. I'm using quite a lot of paint here to mix a brown that's close to her skin tone, swatching it on her stomach to make sure that I got it right. This color looked like I had it right, but I felt like it still was a bit off. You can see on screen why the color before this was actually a bit closer. But anyway, I went in with the first layer. I think this turned out too red. But you can see that I'm doing very thin layers, even if the color is off. The painting technique is great. I'm using this very fine, quite stiff brush to paint on very, very thin layers. Making sure to mix it with medium and with water to really get the thinnest possible layer that I can get. And then I'm going in with another layer that I think is a little bit closer to the color that it's supposed to be. And here she is, all painted. You can see that the color is a bit too red, but again, done is better than perfect. And here I'm dressing her in this little romper that I'd already made for her. I imagined her quite cozy and calm and chill and sweet. And then this hoodie was also made for her. I tried to match the color of her lipstick to this hoodie. I don't think I did a perfect job, and it was kind of hard to get this up over her hips, but then it ties in the back and her hands come back on, and there she is. Those are all the steps that I took, and I don't think I described my process very much. And then here's a little up-close look at Serena. She is wearing earrings from, I think they're from Gold Spirit Torlai. I got 2 of her because, as I said in the Deuce video as well, I received the whole pack twice. Now for her hair, this is done with a very small yarn, actually, that came with a kit for knitting socks, and I just thought that it was a nice texture and a nice color on her skin tone. And I rooted the part lines, I think, and then maybe a couple anchor threads in the rest of her scalp. And then I started this off as a really small braid and then split it around her ears to come back together at the end. And then I just made a ton of knots to make her little bun. And you can see I did the same on the other side. I thought this worked quite well to hold it all together. However, I think there's more realistic ways to do a hairstyle like this. I am thinking of doing a tutorial for how that I do my braiding on doll heads. I've seen Delightful's video. I do it a bit differently, and so maybe keep an eye out for that in the near future. And then for her face, I did use black on this face, and you can also see that I used a slightly lighter color than her skin tone to define her edges, or her baby hairs. And on the teeth, that I feel really accomplished about her teeth. For the bottom row of teeth, I just used a gray, and then I painted her top teeth white and just painted in those tiny little triangles, which makes it look a lot like teeth without having too much detail. I added those little white stripes in her eyes along her eyelids so that she'd really look almost a bit teary-eyed because she's smiling so big. I thought that'd be cute. And I put her eyebrows quite low down, also so that she looks a bit friendly, because I think Claudia can look a bit manic sometimes. Which, if you like it, that's one thing. Ooh. I just thought that maybe, just maybe, she needs a tiny little wolf nose. I think I will give her a tiny little wolf nose. I'm going to use this as a palette. Actually, the blue off the back. I'm going to grab quite a neutral red, not too much of it. That's already probably too much. I'm going to grab a warm leaning yellow, close to orange. Oh. Don't use your teeth to open. Wait, that's a lot. And then I think am going to use a green leaning blue, but this is a bit of a desaturated blue. It's Prussian blue. I've been filming these in one go, and I didn't realize that all of my were creatures have a little painted on nose, except for Serena. So we gotta fix that. And then I'm taking a very teeny tiny brush. And where did I put the water? There's water up here, right? I am going to mix some water with the red and some medium. And then I'm gonna try and make a nice orange, which should be quite easy. I might need more red after that. That's too much blue. So. If we add more blue, it'll start turning green. Can you hold that for me? Yes, thanks. However, I don't want it to go more orangey, so now we're going to add some purpley red. This could also be achieved by kind of balancing your red and your blue. I don't want to do that right now, so we're going to do it like this. And that becomes quite saturated. So we add a bit more blue. I think that's getting us close to where I want to be. I'm gonna add a little stripe on her cheek to see what it looks like. I think that's too saturated for me still. So we're gonna add a little touch more blue. Oh, I think that's getting close. But I want it to be a bit pink leaning. I want it to be almost kind of the color of her sweater. I add the medium not only for the paint to flow better, but also because I think it might help the paint dry in a better way as well. I think that's the color I want for her little nose. And then I'm going to paint it. We're going to paint. You can't really see what I'm seeing, but I'm painting first a little stripe between her nostrils. So you can't really see it too well. And then I paint a little stripe at the back of her nostril, kind of where her nostril connects with her cheek. And then a little line over top to connect that. Which is, it really is just where the natural shadow of the nose would already be. What does that look like? It is still a bit too saturated, isn't it? Let's see if a blue can save it. Maybe that's better. Yeah, that's better. Wipe off the excess on my thumb. Like so. And then I think I went too far onto the front of her nose. Or did I? Actually, that's kind of cute. From here it looks a bit silly, but in the camera it actually looks really cute. So, actually, oh, I don't really paint in real time like this ever on video. But there's a first time for everything. There she is. Is that even? Did I do an uneven job on you, girl? Okay, I think that's more even. Oh, I think she's cute. I think she's adorable. I think she's so cute. Oh, I love her little nose. I think what I'm gonna do as a last little touch is mix these colors here to get a bit of a lighter, pinkier tone. And then put that kind of on the edges here. Just to give it a little bit of depth. Will it be very visible? Probably not. Will anyone notice? Probably not. But will I know that it's there? Yes. She's cute! She's adorable! We wash out our brush. What's really silly is that I'd already filmed her final reveal, so now I need to redo that. But that's okay. So now, where's the Q-tip I used on Deuce? I'm really destroying the movie magic, am I not? It's all being filmed on the same day. But that's okay. Now we're gonna take some acetone nail polish remover and remove that. And look at that. Adorable! She's so cute. Oh, I already thought she was so cute, but now the little nose. What's that? The little nose does it for me. She's so cute. Okay. Anyway, let's get to the final reveal. DC Superhero Girls plus a Deuce Gorgon head. So this doll also it's gonna be a doozy. The main thing that we're working on first is the fact that I thought her hands were too small for her body. The DC Superhero Girls proportions really befuddle me a bit. So I anchored some bits of wire into her hand and then just started sculpting on top of that, trying to figure out a hand shape that seemed elegant, that I also could like sturdily shape and attach to the armature that was in place, which is why one of her hands is going to have this weird little peace sign, thumbs up kind of moment going on. I think the one I'm sculpting now, because I could only get 2 pieces of wire to stick in, so the other fingers are just bent over. You can see me doing that here because I just wasn't sure that they were going to be sturdy. Yeah, funny little pose, but I guess it works. And then here she is, and first things first, we're gonna saw her head off because I thought that the DC Superhero Girls and the Deuce Gorgon head had the same size neck hole, and it turned out that it's just ever so slightly different. I think the Deuce neck hole is more shallow, so we're beheading her, pulling the neck plug out of her head, or the neck plug? Yeah, fine. Here I'm showing you kind of what her hair looks like, I guess. There's too much happening. Anyways, I also thought her legs were too long, especially her calves. And let's see, I took a note on this. Or did I? Yes, I did. What's their name? Zin Parker on Instagram is working with the DC Superhero Girls and is also shortening their legs. That gave me the idea, actually, because it just made so much sense to me to shorten their legs a bit, make them more proportionate. So that's what I did. Now I'm mixing some epoxy sculpt, or I'm not mixing it. What I often do is I take 2 similarly sized balls of part A and part B, and then I split them all into smaller amounts, because the first couple customs that I did, I would just mix this big ol' amount of epoxy sculpt, or I was working with Milliput at the time, and it would harden while that I wasn't working on those bits, and I would have leftovers that I wouldn't know what to do with. And so if I take 2 even pieces and split them all quite evenly into 8 pieces, then I can mix those little bits at a time and not have any epoxy sculpt curing before that I wanted to cure. Now I'm attaching the head. I'm not adding any reinforcements to the neck. I'm attaching the neck. I'm not adding any reinforcements because I didn't want it to be bulky. I want it to be as smooth as possible. And it seems sturdy enough because I tried not to sand down the epoxy sculpt too much and really tried to smooth it out with the water as much as I could. And now I'm adding these funny little bases that I can press the legs into. And you can also see that I carved these notches into the legs just to make sure that they would line up properly and have a space for the thread to go. Here you can see that I worked on all of the sculpting at the same time on these different dolls, and I'm adding some more clay to her fingers. I'm honestly kind of stressed watching this. I really did not enjoy sculpting her hands, and I think that's because they just looked so ugly for so long. I really tried to make them bulky so that I could carve away at them, and I did enjoy carving away at them, but I also didn't sand them that smooth. I just think sculpting onto the base that I had prepared, I didn't like that much. Yeah, but so I'm adding on some more thickness because I didn't know how else to add length. I wanted them to be longer, but the first round of sculpting I couldn't get them very long. So then the second round of sculpting I had to make them longer and thicker. Now I've drilled some holes into the legs and I am putting the thread through and pulling it tight and adding super glue to secure the two ends of the leg together. I could have, and then this leg, I guess the epoxy didn't stick to the plastic, so I glued it together. I could have done this on the neck, but as you can see later at the end, I didn't get this down very smooth, and so I'm kind of glad that I left the neck alone, even though I covered up the neck with her clothing and not her legs. There you could see how I kind of carved down her hands. And now another thing that bothered me about her is that her hairline was very square. So here I'm going in with a similar color to her hair and painting in a new rounder, a bit more feminine of a hairline with less angles on it. And I rooted that in, and then here you can see the hairstyle I gave her. She has these pins in her head because her bangs are now over the front of her face and they connect in the back. I sanded her down. Oh, this is moving very fast. I think her hands right now look quite nice. However, when I paint them, they start looking a bit weird. Now I'm adding some more epoxy sculpt to try and smooth out some of the bits in her legs that needed to be smoothed out. They still don't end up perfect, but yeah, this is how you do that. I just press down with a gloved finger quite hard and then smooth it out with water. Now we're adding some blue, some white, some pink, and some yellow and some medium to try and mix her skin tone. I am once again trailing up her body with colors, trying to get it closer and closer. The first color was green. I don't know why I thought that I needed to swatch that, but okay. And again, going in with very, very thin layers. And I'm also repainting her head because her head also wasn't exactly the right tone and it had some chipping going on, especially from the reroot. So I'm going in and making sure all of the sculpted parts and all of the parts that were donated by Deuce match her quite well. And I'm also just making sure that her face is an even base to start painting onto. There she is, all painted. Her hands at this point don't look that nice in my opinion, but that's fine. And there's her face. Do I not show you repainting her face? I guess I don't. I'm sorry about that. For the glitter, I think is the most important part. I used some actual makeup mixed with a glossy medium. And then what I just showed you, a real disaster happened, which is that I let her head sit in hot water to try and get her onto the neck peg, and it just bubbled and looked horrible. And then when I tried to squeeze it onto the non-existent neck peg, it got even worse. So here I'm trying to clean it up with some, I'm moving so fast, with some acetone, and then I just painted over it again. That was just to smooth out the texture. And here you can kind of see me trying to find a shape for her dress. I'm really just cutting pieces and fitting them onto her, and then seeing where that we need a dart and sewing the dart, cutting off the excess fabric, and then trying it on her again. And that now fits her bust quite nicely. And yeah, I think that it's very simple, but it works very well. Then for the skirt, you can see I'm again using one of those little baggies that come with stuff you buy sometimes. This is from some JBL earbuds. And I found some darts where I needed to put them. And here she is. I really love the way she turned out. Even though her face is quite textured, it's okay with me. And I just think I love the shimmer I used on her eyes. And I just think she looks so like evil but cool. For her rooting, you saw how I added a bit of rooting here around the edges. But because she is a deuce sculpt, I actually could only root around the edges, and then this part here, let's bring Deuce in. He has a big hole in his head. Wait. So, Deuce has this on his head, and you can see how there's these indents that go into his head, and then this makes one large hole. And so her hair is rooted, if this makes sense. Oh my gosh, does this make sense? Let's grab a pen so we can point a bit better. Her hair is rooted right along here, where there is a bit less depth of the hole, where her skull is a bit more surface level. And then I've rooted all around this edge, right before the indent starts. And then what I did is I made, with this blonde hair, I made glue wefts. So I put it flat onto a piece of plastic and covered it in glue and then cut off the excess. And so if you want to go and look what is inside her head, you just end up with more blonde hair underneath. And I also painted it blonde. And then what else I did is I covered all of this depth. Before I glued the glue wefts on, I covered that in epoxy sculpt. So her head, let's see. Her head is very hard. You can kind of squish her here, but you can't squish her up here. I did that by just moving all her hair out of the way, and these two pieces I pulled up as straight as I could. And then another thing that I actually did, you can see that this hole goes quite far back. And then here where, oh, the snakes push out. Okay. About here, I made a big ol' piece of hair that I'd folded in half so that it made a loop like this. And then I sewed the loop into that hole in the head. So into here, basically. I hope that makes sense. And then that's where all the wefts came together and all of the hair over top. And then this also meets in the back. But so that's how I achieved her hairstyle. And I don't think you missed more. This still flakes, but that's okay with me. You don't see too badly. Her nails hold up really well. Because they're made out of foam clay, they're flexible. And so I'm not really worried about them popping off. However, that one does look a bit... It doesn't look too sturdy. I think that one's quite thin. Yeah, it's very thin. But especially the slightly thicker ones, they hold up really well, and I'm not worried about them at all. And I will probably do this again because it works so well. I do think I could have put more effort into sanding her hands. However, again, I just needed to get this done. Same with her legs. With her legs, there was also the difficulty of the thread I used to join her legs kind of becoming exposed. And I could have gone in with another round of epoxy to cover that, but I really didn't want to. So I didn't. And she's done now, and I think she's stunning. I love her. I think she's so cool. So yeah, that's her. Making a mini rat's bathroom. So this project comes to you almost finished, but with a lot of unfinished bits. And first of all, I needed a place to hang up the shower head. So I marked the height that I wanted, put through a paper clip, and then bent it around to secure it into the back of this cardboard wall. This is basically a cardboard box covered in paper mache with all of these little bits added in. Then I'm sanding the sculpting that I did on this girly's little face, and it's a bit chaotic. Apologies for that, guys. And here I'm mixing my epoxy sculpt to secure the little hook into the wall. This was quite tricky. I find it really annoying to sculpt onto wire because it constantly wants to just kind of pop off of the wire again. But I made a little hook, and then I put in the shower head to secure it at the right angle, and then just let it sit like that for a while. I also went in and added some epoxy sculpt at the back to hold it in place. And there we go, it is in place. The shower head can now hang above the tub, not in front of the tub. Next, I think now we're going to paint her face, and we're going to take off her ears. These have been sculpted into pins that I've stuck into her head, and I've left little bald spots for the ears to go into, and I'm sticking the ears into a piece of cardboard to kind of hold them while I paint them. And then I've also tied her hair out of the way. I'm going in with a neutral red, a warm yellow, and I think that's again a Prussian blue. I use a lot of Prussian blue apparently, and then some white, and I've used the back of her neck as a little reference guide, and I'm painting her face, and then I'm going in with a little Q-tip to try and get a smooth blend so that I don't have to paint her whole face. And then we're also painting her ears that color. I think her ears turned out so cute. I really love her little ears. The reason I turned this Bratz girly into a little rat is because I think I saw someone's post where it was like a New York girl Bratz. Here I'm mixing it pink for the inside of the ears. A New York girl Bratz. I don't know how to explain it. And she had a rat as a pet. And I think the caption was rats, and I was like, oh, dang it. Yeah, I want to make something like that. And so that's what I did. I also anchored her face on with the same method as I did with my sheep girl. I drilled actual holes through the head because the Bratz heads are really hard, especially the mini Bratz, and then just tied some knots and sculpted on top of that. Here I've made her nose quite pink, and I've made her teeth kind of yellowy, and now we're going in with tiny little eyebrows. I found it really hard to at the same time work with the mold but also make her look quite ratty. I think I'm still figuring out what exactly my face up painting style is. I sometimes tend to go very anthropomorphic and cartoony, and then sometimes I almost go a bit weirdly realistic. I think this one's a bit weird, and that's okay with me. And now I'm going in with some shadows to define some of the shapes on her face, like her upper eyelids, but also her eye bags, around her nose, below her teeth. And I'm also going in with some freckles because she has a lot of space between her nose and her eyes, and she just seemed a bit too flat. I think for most of the time in this repaint I've not been going in with any black, but now I'm defining the outer and inner edge of the eye with some black paint to give it some extra depth and add that extra contrast. And then we're going in with the highlights. That's the word. I keep forgetting it. And I'm putting these in the eyes symmetrically so that she really looks a bit silly, a bit goofy, a bit I think people call it wall-eyed, just because she is supposed to be a rat. And then lastly, I'm going in with a layer of Liquitex Matte Medium. I don't have the varnish, to seal her in. And then we're going in with the shower curtain. This was a major obstacle for me. I just could not figure out how to do it. I didn't want to buy wires somewhere. I'm stubborn like that. And then in the end, I have these coated metal paper clips that I just kind of, you saw it, I bent them together and crimped them and squeezed them, and they seem to work well enough as a shower curtain. And I poked some holes. I cut this piece of fabric that I also used on the Changeling girl. I cut it off at the seam so that there actually was a loop for me to put the wire through, and put it through the holes and hung it up. And it was very quick and easy, and I think it's really quite effective, which I'm very glad about. And I'm just bending over the ends. In the end, I think I put some glue on there to keep it in place. And the shower curtain is maybe slightly short, but I don't know if I fully care about it. And then I think this was the last thing I did, which was to put some foam clay around the windowsill to hide the exposed cardboard there. And I'm using this weird little sculpting tool to squish it into a bit of a rectangular shape, and like get all the little, what do you call it, the bumpy bits, get those a bit more smooth. Yeah, I used this color of clay that doesn't necessarily fit with the whole color scheme of the bathroom, but it works well enough for me. And I think that's all we have. I think I forgot to pull out the wires again after bending them over. I think they're in way too tight right now. But yeah, that's all. I almost forgot to show you the rat bathroom. The thing is, I did not paint the outside. I might still in the future, but it really doesn't bother me. And the amount of effort it would take to do that is a bit higher than I'm willing to do. You can see here the loops that hold the shower curtain in are just glued. And this is from the shower head. Around here you can see some paint from the tiles, and then we get back to the front. Let's get you some detail shots. So here is the first wall. These are all a polymer clay cane that I put well inside of. This is, all of these details are bits from the mini brats. Look at this. This is my favorite thing. It's a tiny little flip phone. And it closes even. It has a tiny little antenna. So I put that next to the sink. All of these details came with a lot of mini brats that I bought on eBay, as did the mirror, which functions quite nicely. This is a sink I made out of polymer clay, and this is just cardboard covered in paper and painted. I used the light blue that I used to paint this wall too. Here's a little boom box that came with the mini brats. And I did make it so that the toilet could open. Yeah. Then we turn around, we get to the shower curtain. This is where I really tried to embody the idea that done is better than perfect. I kept not being sure how to do the shower curtain, and this seemed quite a good solution. I also might in the future still color the like braid that is, what's that called? The like pipe that the water goes through. This little cat, can I get to it? Oh my gosh. This little cat also came with the mini brats. And then there's the window with the foam clay windowsill. This flooring is actually watercolor paper that I painted like a big ol' splotchy collection of colors onto that I thought would work well in the bathroom, and then cut into squares and arranged on there again. I also covered it with acrylic medium to make sure that it would stand up to some stuff. And then this is a little chair with a pillow that also came with the mini brats and the little teddy bear I think I got in a toy store. Let me show you this little box that's also with it. Look at that. There's a tiny little compact in there. It doesn't really have much detail on the inside, but still, that's just adorable. And it has a little tube in there as well. It came with a brush, which I dropped and it disappeared. And I don't think I will ever find it again. Which is why most of these are glued down. Here's this little perfume bottle that's shaped like a boot. And the top of the bottle actually comes out, which is just amazing. This is a little hair clip. Yeah. And then in the end, then after all of that, we have the doll. She has these sad little eyes that I applied too much gloss to, so she looks like she's kind of crying. She has her little rat teeth. Rats have quite orange teeth, so I tried to include that. A little ripped safety pin shirt, these long jeans, and these little shoes. And then I thought it might be interesting to show her next to an actual untouched mini Bratz doll. They're all naked. The ones that I have are all naked, so that's too bad. But I think this gives you a good idea of how different the face looks. The lot I got came with a double, and so these are the exact same doll. So I think you can get a good comparison. I rerouted her with purple nylon, dark purple nylon from the Doll Hair Emporium. Yeah, I think that's quite fun. I think that's quite cute. And then I will also, I completely forgot to record this earlier, but my lore that I've come up with for why she's a rat, I don't know. However, maybe she got cursed or something, and it's one of those short story hellish landscapes where the walls are reprimanding her, going, well, 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 well. And her mirror says, all rats. And that's also why she's crying. She's been cursed. She's been cursed to turn into a rat. Maybe she was getting ready for a night out and she said one too many mean words about herself, or I don't know. I just think I'm not going to turn the rest of the mini brats into rats so that she has to show up to a party looking like a rat. I'm not sure about that. Maybe she told all of her friends' secrets, and her friends are witches who cursed her to be a rat. Maybe that's what's happening. And she just got dressed for a party and went to go do her makeup in the mirror and realized that she has become a rat. Who knows? I love conspiring. What's the word? I just love coming up with stuff. So yeah, thanks for listening. Give me your theories in the comments if you want of why she turned into a rat or what happened to get her cursed. Yeah, thanks, bye. Custom rainbow high with a chibi head. For this doll, I'm using, as you can see in the back, just leftover pieces. I used her face for something else, I used her knees for something else, and I just had her body left over, and I didn't really want her to go to the trash because also her arms are so nicely articulated. So you can see I built this weird contraption around the leftovers of her neck or her jaw to kind of make a base that I'm later going to attach into the top of the TV. And then here, another one of the dolls that I was working on while I was finishing my works in progress, I use a lot of milliput on, and it just got so heavy that on this doll I decided I would try and work with just very light crafty materials. I think because I already knew that I was saving this doll from becoming just trash, that I was just gonna let myself have a lot of fun. And so that's also what's happening here. I'm just using cardboard to build a little like side table. Her cut off legs, you might have seen earlier, there's these holes in the top of it that her legs are gonna go into. So basically, rather than wearing something like knee-high boots or something, she's just a side table from mid-thigh down. Which I think works with the TV head. There you can see. I think it works, but I also think it's a little silly. So then here I covered the whole little table with foam clay. And you can see I just really made a little slanted rectangle shape for her head and glued it all together. And I used a piece of packaging plastic for the see-through bit. And now I'm working on putting some foam clay on here too. I didn't like how desaturated the purple was, so I went with a pink. I got this foam clay from a grocery store. I think it was like a startup company that was trying to sell foam clay and like video tutorials that came with a QR code. And it was quite cheap, so I bought it and I mixed it into nice colors, and I'm using it for this project now. I've never worked with foam clay before, but I thought here it worked quite well. You can see that I kind of just squeezed it, like stuck it onto the cardboard and then tried to smooth it out to cover most of the cardboard and like really tucked it into all the seams. I found that this really stabilized all of the cardboard seams. It really adhered and held it together. I might do this again in the future, because this worked so well to make something quite sturdy and yet hollow. I also used it to secure the little weird disc I made into the cardboard. I left this hole in the bottom that her head could fit into. And then I'm making some buttons. For her legs, they are glued in there just with foam clay, and it sticks surprisingly well. I filled up the holes with quite a dark foam clay, like a near black, and just stuck her legs in there, and it actually sticks great. I think it's friction. I think it's the fact that none of the parts are very heavy. Like the heaviest part is her doll body. But it really worked very well. And yeah, I had a lot of fun. I feel like now that she's finished already while I'm recording this voiceover, and she just has this very playful quality to her. And I think the texture of the foam clay, while maybe not that appealing, here I'm using my glue tube to make a little CD DVD slot. Oh, I forgot what I was talking about. I think she looks a bit like claymation, and that's cute. I wanted to say that. I don't know if I already said that. And yeah, here you can see that it really adheres to the cardboard in quite a nice way, where I'm able to really just squish it around and cover it. And ideally, I think I would have gone in with another layer of foam clay, or maybe a layer of paint, because the foam clay is a bit see-through and you can see kind of the brown of the cardboard through it. Or maybe in the future I would first paint the cardboard and then go in with the foam clay, just so that you don't get that weird see-through gray stuff. But altogether, for giving this doll a new life, I think it worked quite well and I really liked it. Here, this I also quite like. I again went in with the back of the glue tube to like make a bit of a grate in the back. I feel like I remember old TVs having this, like just to like make it less hot in the back or something, I guess. I don't know. I like the detail though. And there's her body finished. And now this is my favorite part. I went and made little pieces of watercolor paper that fit in to the top slot that I left open quite well, and added little tabs on there. And then I drew some of my favorite childhood TV shows. First being Samurai Jack. I think last year, me and my partner, we watched all of Samurai Jack all the way through, and then also the Adult Swim like sequel season, and I can't believe how well that Samurai Jack held up. It is so great. As a kid, I think I maybe found it a bit boring sometimes, and it can be a bit boring. Some of the episodes are quite clearly filler, but generally Samurai Jack is so good. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend you watch it. I don't know where you could find it, but I highly recommend you try and find it and watch it. Yeah, I really like, I'm just gonna gush about Samurai Jack a bit. I really like how there's almost a meditative quality to a lot of the Samurai Jack episodes. I feel like Samurai Jack is a very calm character, and you will have episodes. There's this one episode where there is barely any sound. There's like you hear just the sound of raindrops and the sound of a deer walking through a forest, and it's really, really wonderful to just sit and watch it and absorb it. And the art is so beautifully made. There's all of these beautiful textures, but then also the really flat colors and the strongly defined shapes. It really, I would argue that Samurai Jack is a masterclass in a serial animated TV show. Not that I've watched that many, but having rewatched Samurai Jack, it's really great. So that's the first one I was working on. I found this picture off of IMDb and just very vaguely sketched it out. And then you can see I'm filling in the back with my red colored pencil. I wanted to simplify the shapes a bit so that I wasn't sitting here for several hours drawing a picture that was maybe not even going to be visible all the time. Yeah, so I simplified it a bit. And I also wanted the texture to be there, again in the spirit of being playful and really letting myself have fun. I wanted it to still look like I drew it with my colored pencils. I thought that would be really sweet quality to the illustrations. Yeah, ugh. I love Samurai Jack. Maybe I should rewatch it again. Also, for context, I graduated illustration. I clicked on something. I graduated illustration just this summer. I studied actually something close to scientific illustration. My school called it nonfiction illustration. And yeah, I feel a bit silly now that I've graduated and realizing that the only way to really make it in the field is through freelance work. And with freelance work, you just have to make a name for yourself before you can really live off of your work. And that feels quite silly, but I talked with my dad about this and he just said there's no way you could have done anything else. I learned what I wanted to know, and now I feel such fulfillment in making my art, and I feel like learning how to do illustration has also taught me how to approach learning other ways of art as well. Like I really think my art education was invaluable, but it is also in the job market not that valuable if you're trying to be hired for something. Another little rant. I really think that I left this piece of footage really long, but if you'd like to, you can just watch me do my little speed paint and zone out. I know that other people say this, you can just turn on your own music and just watch me doodle these little TV shows. I won't be offended. Go ahead if you want to. And there's Samurai Jack done in the TV. Doesn't that look great? Isn't that so cute? Next we're going on to Winx Club, and I decided to draw this picture I found of Bloom. Bloom was always my favorite. I always wanted to be her. I was born in the year of the dragon, And I also, this is so silly, but I always, watching Winx, felt left out because I have brown hair and blue eyes, and I think there's two characters with brown hair, Layla and, or is her name, I think her name's Layla and Flora, but they both have brown eyes, or I think Layla might have green eyes. Anyways, Bloom had blue eyes, but now brown hair. This is, yeah, I was a small child, but I like that she had a blue color scheme. Here I'm doing a funny little trick where I'm pressing this little green pencil into the paper quite hard and then going over it with the blue pencil with very light pressure. You can see that the lines stay clean. I thought that was very nice, very smart. And I just went in with a black fine liner to define the sketch that I'd made before, and then went in with my colored pencil to just very flatly fill in the colors. I don't even think I did shading. Again, because I just wanted to have fun. A little color by numbers. I also have been meaning to rewatch Winx, but I'm not sure if it's any good. I remember having one of the comic books when I was younger and really, really loving the story in there. I think there was the princess, what was her name? The only name I can come up with is Diaspora. That cannot have been her name. If her name was Diaspora, that's crazy. Yeah, I remember that comic was really interesting to me with I think Prince Sky was in some sort of arranged marriage situation with the princess. I don't remember. I just remember that her name can't have been Princess Diaspora, but I remember I really liked her design with the really blonde hair, and there it's done. How cute. With the really blonde hair, and she had a lot of burgundies. Yeah, let me know if you remember that. Next, for Monster High, I actually just did the Monster High title, the logo, because there was so much detail in every picture I found. But yeah, you probably aren't surprised, seeing as you're on a mainly doll customizing channel right now. But I grew up loving Monster High. I remember, this is I hope you're excited to just listen to me chat for a while. I, as a kid, remember we would get these toy catalogs around the holidays, and I got to have one to myself. And I remember before falling asleep, I would leaf through it and look at the Monster High page. And I think on there is where we found the Monster High website. And I remember going on there and watching every single episode and just being enamored with it. And then also, maybe I'm remembering this incorrectly, but I remember there was this episode as a movie, like an animated movie that was maybe 45 minutes long, about this rivalry between the werewolves and the vampires. And it was there one day, and then the next day I went back to look for it again, and I just couldn't find it anymore. And I think it was just uploaded for Halloween or Friday the 13th, and then it disappeared again. But I never figured that out. So that was crazy. I keep saying crazy. I don't know if that's the nicest word to use, but it was very interesting, to say the least. Now what I did here is I went in with a darker pink to do the tops of the letters, and then a lighter pink to kind of fake the gradient. And then now I'm going in with a dark fine liner to draw out the shapes. I don't think I sketched in the skelet, which is a daring choice for sure. But I think, again, in school, I really learned how to kind of anticipate what I was drawing where and where things were going to end up, which is really invaluable. I was not able to do that before. If you're thinking of going to illustration school, little tip, you very well could. I think it's more a question of, do you have the self-discipline to teach it yourself? Because if you do, you can so get by with the internet. The internet is a great learning place, and you can learn a lot from the internet, and you'd probably be able to make it as a freelance illustrator with internet knowledge, given that you have the discipline to teach yourself through the internet. And that's a whole another question. I do not have the discipline to teach myself. And I also found it really useful to have mentors, like looking after me, pointing out my little like downfalls that I kept being troubled by. Like I kept setting really high expectations, and my teachers would walk in and be like, "Are you sure that you're gonna get all of that done?" And I'd say, "Yeah, of course." And then I'd way overwork myself trying to meet an unrealistic expectation. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that I'm still doing this. It's just that during school, my teachers helped it not get too much in the way of my learning. Yeah, so that's my advice. I think that's for most creative schooling, you can learn a lot online. When it comes to doctors and stuff, you should go to medical school or lawyers, but in the creative fields, we're so online right now that you might as well, benefit from that, especially if it's a freelance field. It's just notoriety you need, and schools can get you contacts, but sometimes it just doesn't work. I don't think my final project... Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Here, I made this little scratchy with the black fine liner and then went in with my black colored pencil to fill in the rest because I didn't want to use up my whole fine liner. So that's how I did that. I think it kept some nice texture. To finish my thought, I think my final project for my studies was not exactly what the school expected or knew how to make contacts for. And so here's the final thing in the TV, how cute. And now we're going on to Totally Spies. And so any of the contacts that my school could have given me just kind of weren't exactly a good fit. So that's also something to consider. If the stuff you want to make doesn't fit with a school very well, a school might not be able to do very much for you. But I still think it's a good experience. What a ramble. So here for my Totally Spies one, I used to love Totally Spies. I remember in the same toy catalog, there was the little compact mirrors they have that they can talk through? There was one of those in the toy catalog, and I remember begging my dad for it. I put it on my little Christmas list. I was like, "Dad, please, I want it." Never got it. Makes a lot of sense that I wouldn't have got it, but I wanted it so bad. You could do toys, do games on there. You could FaceTime Jerry with it. I was in love with that thing. I love little gimmicks. Never got it though, but I really loved Totally Spies when I was younger. I loved all their different outfits. I thought that was so fun. How I'm going about drawing this one is a bit different from the rest, where I'm going in, I made a sketch of their pose, and then I went in trying to define the big color shapes, like the colors of their suits, their faces, their hair, and wherever necessary I layered them. I think her name's Alex, Clover, and Sam, right? Alex, the one in the yellow suit, her suit is actually quite mustardy, so I went in with an orange first before I layered the yellow over top. And then I think you're gonna see me coloring for a little while longer. Yeah, I filled in the back with just one dark burgundy color to really make them pop. I wasn't gonna recreate that little, I don't even know what to call it, but the just all of the colors that they have in the background, good for them. I'm not gonna do that. So I just went in with that burgundy to fill it in. I have a strong urge to look up that compact on eBay, see if anyone has it, I can get it. But I haven't thought of it in several years, and I probably will just forget about it again. So, yeah. I'm sure a lot of people in the doll community have a strong urge to buy themselves the things that they didn't get to have as a kid. I just recently had that. You'll see it in another video. I really, really wanted Core Claudine, Generation 1 core Claudine, and I never got her. And this year when the Cree Productions came out, I bought her for myself. And I think in the future, let me know if you would want to see that. I'm probably going to do it anyways, but it's nice to get encouragement. I'm thinking of curling her hair and redoing her face. So that'll be probably a video that I do in the future. And then here, once I'm done, back to the actual video topic, back to the actual footage. Here I'm going in with my little fine liner and defining the shapes. I went in and darkened Alex's hair because the black seemed a bit grey, and then I'm just going in and quite loosely and like relaxedly defining the edges and the shapes. And this was actually really fun. I really enjoyed this. I purposefully made their faces quite silly just because I thought it was quite cute, but I also thought it was really just wonderful to see something that I'd really made quite quickly come together so well. I really enjoy how this one looks. I think this one is really cute. This video will probably be the second to last of the Conquering My Works in Progress series, and probably because this one is one of the longest ones, if not the longest one. But I really hope that the series goes well. I hope that it's received positively, which at this point of recording I've uploaded one, and I'm gonna upload a second one later today. And the first couple ones aren't necessarily my favorites, which I hope isn't going to negatively impact the response to the later ones. But I mostly hope that this gives me more of a routine of how that I edit and post my videos. Because with Una, with my sheep girl, I was really just doing whatever felt right. And I'm still doing that, and I'm still figuring this out. And the thing is, I did basically grow up on YouTube, and I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what other people do. But then to take that like subconscious understanding and turn it into actual practice and actions, it's quite scary, and it feels a bit weird. So I'm hoping that, yeah, if you see this, if you like it, please let me know either with a like or a comment. If you enjoyed hanging out with me for this very chatty video, it'd be nice if you subscribed and stuck around. I'd love to have you here and share my funny little things with you. There she is, my little fun finished Totally Spies one. Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out. It's so fun to be doing this, and at the same time so mortifying. Yeah, little moment of vulnerability over. Let's return to the drawing. This is probably the silliest looking one because the sketch, as you can see, I did in a light green and it's quite vague. And then I just went in with fine liner trying to define the whole thing. And I think the hand is too high up, and then the forehead ends up being too big and the eyebrows too far down, and he just ends up looking so incredibly silly. But I had fun, so it doesn't matter. It's all good. It's all fine. And I remember Ben 10 was more of my brother's favorite. I never really got it. I don't think I paid too much attention to it because I didn't necessarily... I really like having... I think as a kid more so. As a kid, I really liked having someone to project onto, as you could tell with my little ramble about Winx Club. And I don't feel like Ben 10 gave me that really. Gwen was there, but I felt like Gwen was often framed as quite whiny by the show, and I didn't really want to project onto someone who was framed as whiny. So I didn't really pay too much attention. However, I loved seeing how Ben problem solves with his different aliens. He goes in and he's like, oh, the door's locked. I'll just turn into this tiny little guy so I can climb through the lock. Oh, I missed my flight. Let me turn into this fast guy and just race you there. Stuff like that I always thought was really fun to see, and I thought his problem solving was really, I don't know if inventive is the word, but I enjoyed it. And then there's this artist on Instagram, and I've seen them other places too, but I think I've mostly seen them on Instagram, that I really enjoy the work of. They sometimes draw Ben 10 and their monsters and all of that in this really fun, like, green, angly, wait, okay, this is really silly, but I found the artist I was talking about on Instagram. They're 1N_4NG3L. So Infinity Angel, but with a 1 and a 4 and a 3. I probably won't remember to put this in the description box because I'm not a professional, but they did some really nice... They do some really nice Ben 10 fan art every now and then, which I really like. Yeah, so here you can see his face turned out quite weird. I tried to mimic the shading that he has in the picture that I found on Google results. And then I even tried to mimic the little light flash that's up in the air above his hand by, again, scratching quite deeply with my pencil into the paper and then going over it lightly with the dark brown I'm using for the background right now. Yeah, there we go. There, I'm doing it. It didn't come up perfectly, but again, we had fun here. I myself always find it quite fun when I get to watch people do speed paints and see their process. However, now that I've left my speed paint process in this video so long, I'm finding it hard to come up with anything to talk about. So that's tricky for sure. There he is, finished in the little TV. At this point, it was getting a bit cramped in there, but it worked. And then lastly, we have my beloved Powerpuff Girls. My first memory of watching the Powerpuff Girls, we were in an airplane, either on the way to or on our way back from visiting family in New Zealand. And I remember we were sitting in this spot with quite a lot of extra legroom, right at the front of the plane. And there were these TVs, and I turned on Powerpuff Girls and was just enamored. I felt so lucky that I lived in a world that Powerpuff Girls existed. Mind you, I was probably 6, maybe only 3. I was still quite young. But yeah, on that airplane ride, I don't think I watched anything but Powerpuff Girls. And so of course it had to have a spot in my little TV. I'm going in with the fine liner to first draw at the girls, and then later you'll see that I go in to color them with my colored pencils. And I love doing the heart background. I think that is so cute. It's adorable. Yeah, I wanted to ask, when you as an audience member watch a YouTuber, do you come to them for their style and their personality, or do you come to them for the specific content they make? Or is there some nuanced third option? Like, because I right now am just quite interested in making dolls and making doll content. It's what I figured out how to film up until now. It's what I have a lot of fun with right now. But I'm also an illustrator, and as you'll see later, I'm also a bookbinder, and there's probably a lot of other things that I might eventually also want to make videos about. And so I guess I'm mostly curious, and let me know in the comments if you want to like give me your thoughts. I am asking. I'm curious, do any of you have any thoughts on how to approach that? Should I make separate channels for separate things? Or should I just title them quite clearly so that you know what you're getting into, and that people who want doll customizing content don't get tricked into it? Or what I was also thinking, I know that there's quite a couple doll YouTubers that do illustration videos drawing their dolls. Would that be a welcome overlap? I think that's mostly my question. If you're here, I would love to hear whether you enjoy the dolls that I make, and whether on top of that you also enjoy the way that I talk, the way that I show my things. Is there anything I could improve? But also, would you show back up if I did something that wasn't dolls? That's all. Very rambly. Thanks for listening. We're finishing up our last little drawing for the Powerpuff Girls. Again, you can see I have quite a lot of texture. I am not trying to be too neat, because this is really just for having fun. And there she is. I've left her, this picture, the Powerpuff Girls picture, as the front one for most of the time, because I think it looks so nice with the foam clay. And then here what I'm doing is I'm flattening out another piece of foam clay. Excuse the fact that I'm covered in brown paint, but I am smoothing out a piece of foam clay, to be very flat, so that I can use it as a book cover. And here I'm using a pair of scissors to cut out a rectangle. And the reason I'm doing this, I'm now cutting a piece of paper to fit inside that cover. The reason I'm doing this is because I wanted the side table to have at least something in there, and I thought having a little book in there would be really cute. And I also wanted to show you guys that if you wanted to, I could do a video on bookbinding. I taught myself how to bookbind purely through YouTube, and I really love doing it. Here's a little trick. I don't remember where I learned it, but if you don't want to poke holes in every individual page, bookbinders will know that that's quite tedious. You can cut through it, either with a razor or with like a saw, and it will work, and then you can sew your pages together. So that's a wonderful discovery, I would argue. I'm really just sewing these together. You can kind of see how I'm looping through the previous stitches and then just going in and out through the holes that I made in the paper. I don't remember what I was talking about. I think I was saying how I taught myself to bookbind through YouTube, and I've been doing it for about 8 years now, and I would argue that I've gotten really good at it. But bookbinding is also something that apparently is quite hard to find a job in, especially in my city. I would know, I've tried. But I have a strong passion for it, and one of my favorite sorts of videos to watch is people binding their own sketchbooks. So let me know if you'd be interested. Aside from that, I'm being quite lazy. I'm just gluing it in without much care, with just a couple dots of glue. That's quite a couple dots of glue. And then I'm squeezing it together and making sure it all fits right. And then another craft, I'm going to be knitting a sweater for her. I learned how to knit when I was 9 by my mother, and I don't like it as much as I like crochet. I think knitting can be a bit stressful for me sometimes, but when it comes to small scale things, I think knitting is the best way to go about it. And I put this whole clip in again because I find it quite satisfying to watch myself, so there you go, you can enjoy it too. I knitted 2 sleeves and then one big piece for the body. For the sleeves, I knit, I think it's 15 stitches on about 3mm needles, maybe 3.5. I'm not entirely sure, and I'm using this colorful mixed yarn. You can see my purl stitches are a bit clumsy. Yeah, I knitted them, I think about, I don't remember how long. I knit a rectangle that was maybe like 3 centimeters wide to 5 centimeters long, and then slowly decreased at the top to make a bit of a curve for the shoulder. And then I think now, I think now I'm still knitting the sleeve actually. It took quite a while. At this point, I had been wanting to get this into one big video and get it uploaded by Halloween. And this was about 3 days before Halloween, and I decided I would knit an entire little sweater. Yeah, here we're knitting the body piece. You can see this is quite long, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit almost all of the way up, and then knit, oh, I don't know how to explain it. Hopefully I'll show it properly. But I knit it with like kind of holes left for me to sew the sleeves into. And don't take this as a knitting tutorial. There is so many better knitting tutorials, and this in the end, it's made with care, but I would also say that it's made a bit haphazardly. So do with that what you will. I think it's really satisfying to watch someone knit. Oh, missed a stitch there. And I picked this yarn because I had it, but I also think that the colors looked quite nice and playful with the rest of my little TV girl. Yeah, I had this very long piece, and then I'm showing you the sleeve, and you can see that it has this little rounded bit at the top where I'm going to attach it to the shoulder, and I left the tails quite long because that's how I'm going to attach it to the doll. And here I've made 2 sleeves, and then you can see the piece for the body, which has these 2 little open bits. And I also did some backwards rows to add a little detail around the chest. And now I'm taking quite a long needle. I think this one is actually a doll rerouting needle, and I'm taking one of the tails and I'm just sewing back and forth. It's really not the nicest way to do this, and if this was a sweater that I wanted to take off the doll, I would probably do it differently. But because for this TV head doll, I just wanted to keep it a bit simple and lighthearted, I didn't worry about that too much, and I just did it the way that I could get it done. And I also didn't worry about my imagined Halloween deadline anymore. We're like half a month later, and I'm really glad that I gave myself that extra time. I was really wearing myself out for something that I'm fully doing for fun. Do you ever do that? I do that very often. It's very silly. So here the sleeve is attached on. I'm cutting off all my little extra ends and then turning it inside out, which with doll sleeves can be so tricky, but then when it comes out, it can be really satisfying. And I think here we're just trying it on. Yeah. But doesn't that look adorable? Doesn't that look so cute? I, at this point, was getting really excited and really happy. I thought it looked really cute. And here we skip ahead where both of the sleeves are sewn on, and I try it on her, and it's the perfect length, and the little extra rows are at the nice level where they add some detail around the bust. And then the last thing I gotta do is just sew up the back, which I did very messily, but it does the job. And she has a sweater, she has clothes. Little Samurai Jack moment, and her hand is so cute. And then I went in, I had this other rectangle of the foam clay that I made, and I cut out some squares. Ignore my very crusty little thumb holes in my sweater. I cut out these 2 pieces and cut off the corners, and I was gonna make them very haphazard drawers. So I used some more foam clay to kind of secure it in the corner, and then just squished it onto there. And like, they look like drawers, but they're really just bendy little front doors. It feels really silly, but the hole up top there just looked a bit off, and I didn't want to make actual functional drawers. I just didn't want to, and it felt nice to incorporate some more pink in there. So now I'm squishing it up so that there can be some contact between all of the foam clay bits, and then putting on some handles. And now we're fast approaching the end of the video, so let's get ready for a final reveal of this TV head Rainbow High girl. So for a little TV headed girl, I don't think you missed a lot of the process. I really don't think you did, but Here's a little close-up look at her. Her legs are really quite stuck in there. I'm pulling quite hard and she's stuck in there. The little doors do work, just in quite a silly way, but I think this is quite a clever way to get them done quick and not spend too much work on it. I think the texture of the foam clay looks quite silly, but I think it adds to the whimsical silliness of this project. And I'm very glad that, oh, I don't know how to show you this. That's very up close. Eek. I'm very glad that these little tabs work quite well and they're not too visible when you view her from the front. Yeah, I think she's cute. The texture of the shirt is really nice. And I wasn't sure I was going to be happy keeping her little rings and her nails, but I just think it adds a nice little detail. And yeah, I really like her. I'm really happy with her. I think she's so cute. I like that there's this like glare on the TV screen, which makes her feel quite realistic. Yeah, thanks for watching and let's get to the final reveal. Welcome back, and today we're going to be turning Nicol Bolas from Magic the Gathering into a fashion doll. I'm using a Toralei and Deuce base from the Ghoul Spirit set, and we missed a lot of steps because this was also a work in progress when I decided I would record it. So now we're stepping into where I am bulking up his horns. A lot of the initial body mods on this doll are done with epoxy sculpt, which makes him really heavy. The reason that I'm adding on more epoxy sculpt to his horns here is because I wasn't sure how to do his armor pieces on his horns, and I decided I would just do it with epoxy sculpt. That's what I knew, and yeah, so that's what I did. I'm smoothing it down here with my gloves. You can see my gloves are quite wet, and I'm using quite a bit of force on my fingers to smooth it out. Here you can see the amalgamation that is his legs. There is Deuce's knee, that's the green one, then there's a rainbow high knee, that's the tan one, and then the orange one is Toralei's knees turned backwards, and that is the bit for his toes. Here I'm sculpting a back toe as well, and I just realized that it was going to get terribly in the way of the articulation. He wasn't going to be able to stand, so in the end I end up smoothing that out. Here I'm still trying to do that. I had a little bit of wire embedded into the back of the orange knee part, Toralei's knee, and I'm trying to sculpt this so that the epoxy sculpt has sturdiness clinging onto that wire, because there was nothing else reinforcing this and I wanted him to be sturdy. What you can also see in this clip a little bit, you'll see it better later once I move him, is that at this point I've done a lot of sculpting to make his thighs quite sturdy and thick, and also you can see down his chest there's all of these scales that kind of overlap each other. I was careful to make sure that the chest joint still was functional. Yeah, that's all done with epoxy sculpt and my little metal tool you've seen me use in every other video in which you see me use epoxy sculpt. Next, we're going to be sewing on his wings. I was using this ochre colored fabric that has on one side a quite canvasy texture and on the other side a bit of a velvety, suede-y texture. I think my mother stripped it off a couch back in her heyday, but now I'm using it for dragon wings. You can see that there's this kind of anchor piece made out of epoxy sculpt that I have made grooves in that the thread can go through, and that was to make sure that the fabric was held in place and wouldn't shift too much. And now I'm sewing the fabric around this really thick sturdy wire that I used to make the wing shape. What you will see later as well is that the joint for the wing is Toralei's arm joint, on both sides. And the reason that I was quite glad to use Torlai Juice and a little bit of the Rainbow High Doll for this is that their skin tones are all close enough to the color that Nicol Bolas is. You'll see this a bit more while painting, but I had quite a bit of trouble figuring out what color to make him, as all of the references I had were 2D art pieces, often with quite strong lighting, and often they don't necessarily seem to consider what this character might look like in 3D. And so I had to do a lot of speculating and decision making, and I think in the end he turned out great. But yeah, I did that so that if the paint ever rubs off, which it is bound to do, especially around the joints, that the color underneath wouldn't be horribly off from the color that the paint was. Which is also why that I used this yellow fabric for his wings. First of all, because it seemed sturdy enough to like end up looking leathery once painted, and also so that if it ever does rub off, which the paint really soaked into this fabric, but if it ever does rub off, we'll still have Nicol Bolas colors, kind of. And here you can see I'm again sewing around these grooves that I made in the epoxy sculpt, and I'm also using a clip to hold the fabric to the wire so that it would stay in place. This really was quite tricky, so I had to make sure that it all stayed where I wanted it to be, so that in the end the wings would be in the right placement, and they did end up looking great. I have him on the table next to me here, and I really like the way he turned out. And I think the wings turned out quite nicely as well, even though I was questioning it for a good while. If you're paying attention to the footage, to the video, you might also notice that his wings right now are this funny eggish shape, or oval shape, I guess, is the more logical shape to compare it to. And that's because I wasn't sure how the wings would line up on him, and I wasn't sure what shape that I wanted to cut them in just yet. And so I left that for later on in the process when he started coming together. I'm really glad I did that, because I wasn't so sure how that I would put him together, or how that he would come together. I wasn't so sure about it. This was really a trust the process doll at every step of the way. He kept looking quite good, and then he kept looking quite weird, and then he kept looking good again, and so I just really had to trust the process. Here, to seal off the end, you can't see it too well, but I went and stitched back through my previous stitches, and there you can see how the articulation works. I scrubbed up the epoxy sculpt that's holding his back together and glued the fabric to that to hold it together, and then also put some super glue on all of the thread holding the joints together. This was to really make sure that this wouldn't come undone. I have a lot of trust in the thread and the fabric and the wire, but the glue is just another step that really helps, because again, I wanted to make sure that this guy was sturdy and would hold together. You can see that the thread is kind of getting stuck on everything. I think I left the thread too long for this, but oh well. And here is the second wing finished. I glued the little tips together, that's what the clip is holding. And this was really exciting for him to come together. However, I also wished that I would have done this a bit later, because you can see that he's quite large, and it was hard to fit him in any sort of frame for filming and be able to film painting him. Here you can see how his little feet turned out. I sanded down his legs to make them smooth, and then put on his head, which I was very excited to do, and then mortified because his neck comes to such a narrow little point right by his jawline. And we will fix that. I will fix that with some foam clay, but I was really glad I did this now, even though it made him harder to paint, because it meant that I knew that there was something off. And here he is. You can see that I used some tape and cellophane, saran wrap to cover his chest, to sculpt his chest piece on top of, and I also reinforced the edges on the wings with foam clay. And now we're getting to his tail. I used the same fabric as the wings and I sewed it together, wrong sides together, to give me the strip that I'm later going to cut his back scales out of, I guess. And then I sewed it together with the other one right side to wrong side so that there would be some variation in the bottom of the tail. This didn't make a big difference, but that's how you learn, by doing things. I encased this long piece of paper clip in it, which I hoped would make it bendable, but it isn't really strong enough. And I attached it to his back with some thread and some knots to a hole that I had left there specifically for this. And I put some glue on it to make sure that it would be sturdy. And I think this is knotted through the end of the paper clips. And then I'm putting on some foam clay to hide this connection point and continue the spikes going down his back into his tail. And I was really glad I used foam clay here because it makes it a bit flexible and it means that the tail isn't stopped from moving in any way whatsoever, which is nice. Before I go on to paint him, I wanted to do a little nickel bolus tour. His arms are very long. He's also very large. I should hold him about here. So he has quite long hair. I have put it up so that it doesn't get touched by the paint when I go in to paint him. And I tried to make sure to, in every piece of him, use dolls that had similar colors to the end color. If you don't know nickel bolus, he's this kind of greeny, yellowy, browny color, it seems. All of his cards have quite strong lighting, but we're gonna improvise. We're gonna figure it out. These are rainbow high knees that I cut to fully extend this way. Then he has Deuce's knees here and Torali's knees. I really didn't set it up the most clever. Torali's knees are here, so he can go like this. Then he has Torali's hips, and let's take his armor off. Torali's chest joint, which is actually kind of overburdened by how heavy he is. Deuce's arms, which I have kind of offset at an angle so that his traps here go up into the curve of his neck a little more. These are Deuce's hands covered in milliput. He's got this foam clay armor everywhere. These wings, are they in camera? No, they're so large. His wings are pieces of wire connected to Torali's elbow joints with a piece of fabric in between and foam clay around it. His horns are mostly milliput. You've got his ears. I am going to consider whether I want to add his little floating ball. His head is Torali's head. Not that you would be able to tell. And yeah, his tail. Oh, his tail is the same fabric as his wings, and it's got, you saw me make it, so it has this little paperclip structure inside so that it could bend. However, I think I stuffed it a bit too well, so he doesn't want to keep it bent. And he is very heavy, and he feels incredibly throwable. And as I'm filming this, I just uploaded my juice video, so by the end of the week, he should be done and painted so that I can finish editing his video. And that's going to be my deadline I set for myself. And we're gonna see how that goes. So, let's cut to painting this guy. Woo! So, on to painting nickel bolus. I already painted the front of him just to save us some time and see if it would work. And what I painted him with is I have these jars that I save my leftover paint in, and every now and then I go and mix them around. And this one had this kind of greeny, browny, tannish color that I thought would work well as a base coat. And I'm using this basically as a primer, and I'm using my same thin brush that's quite fine to just cover it in a really thin layer, and then I can always go back for a second layer. And you can see the fabric really soaked up the paint. It was really quite hard to get it even, and it just kept getting really patchy. But the rest of him, I had a fun time covering him up, painting him. It was nice to see that my sculpting came together quite well. I don't feel like it's very lumpy in many places, which some of the other videos in the series, the sculpting did look very lumpy. I painted his tail. I think his tail is really funny. And his wings, the fabric really did not take it very well. The foam clay took the paint really well. I want to work with it again. That was really nice. And yeah, you can see how patchy the wings are. It really looked horrible. And after adding enough layers that the wings started looking smooth, the wings had like 6 layers of paint on them. You'll see it later. They get really stiff. And I think it's all right in the end. I think I can still work with it. But if you're looking to use fabric wings on a dragon doll you're making, I recommend trying how that they take paint and maybe reconsidering your plans, because if I knew it was going to be like that from the start, I'm not sure I would do it like this again. Then also, of course, always making sure to get paint in the joints, like in his armpits and stuff, even though it will probably rub off if it hasn't already. But here, doesn't he look cool? He looks like he's made of mud. He looks like he's entirely made of mud right now. I think that's really fun. And now what I'm doing is I'm covering everything in a layer of actually thinned down wood glue. And the reason I'm using thinned down wood glue is because it's what I have. It's easily accessible. I know it stays flexible and it will protect it. It's like a strong enough adhesive that I know it will protect him. And I also don't think it will yellow. We will see. But I'm pretty sure it won't. I don't know what it is. Let's see. Does it say on the bottle? It's without any solvents in it. It doesn't say what it is. That's alright. Yeah. I'm covering him in a layer of that as another layer of primer, basically, just to make sure that it's all well and sealed in. This also stiffened up the wings quite a bit. I don't know if I would recommend using wood glue as a sealant. I don't know what kind of results it has. However, I'm using my own judgment and I think it should work fine, especially this one. I haven't seen it become discolored yet, and my other options right now are glue and my matte medium, which I know can stay sticky sometimes. Now we're color mixing. I'm mixing up quite a dark orange, and as you can see in my reference picture, his coloring is kind of all over the place, but I'm going in with this orangey color to try and bring back some warmth and also give a base coat so that when I paint over it, he won't just look bright green, because he looks quite greeny, but I didn't want him to look like toxic green. You can also kind of see his hair blend, which has blonde, orange, green, white, a little bit of black, some brown. It has a ton of colors to also try and achieve this. I think I would call him bronzy, but like a very yellow toned bronze, but it's not clean enough of the color for it to be gold, in my opinion. I think the hair in the end ended up a bit light, but I think that's all right. But yeah, so this was the first color that I thought I would use to achieve his final color, and I'm putting that again, making sure to get the joints, making sure to get everything. I added a lot of this footage mostly because I found it satisfying to watch, and I hope you do as well. I think it's so nice getting to see the color shift like that. At this point, I think I'm using quite a tough bristly brush just to make sure that I'm really just getting a thin layer. I don't think right now it matters too much that it's super smooth, especially because this is just a base layer. And I also think it's so funny to have Nicol Bolas laying on the table, belly up, or belly down, lifting up his tail so that I can get paint on his butt. I think that's so funny. The lore of Nicobolas makes him out, he's quite a horrible guy. He hasn't really done much good for the world, and so I think it's so funny that somewhere in the universe he is being turned into a fashion doll. Now I've mixed a really dark green, and I am just getting that into all the nooks and crannies. This is going to be the shadow color, and yeah, I'm just brushing it in, and then anything that sticks out a bit too much, I'm wiping it off with my finger. My finger is one of my most used tools when it comes to painting, wiping stuff away, dabbing out little edges, everything like that. And if you have heavy metals or stuff in your paint, it's maybe not so good to do that without gloves on, or make sure to wash it off quick. It's just so easy to do it like this. Don't do as I say, not as I do. Protect yourself. Your skin is your largest organ. It's good to not get too many bad chemicals on there, and if they do get on there, to not leave them on too long. But you can see that I'm really quite haphazardly painting and then just wiping off the excess paint. At this point, I'd worked my way up from his crotch. I started at his crotch because that's the least visible area, and I've just worked my way up, and now we're getting to the face, which was so fun to fill in his eye sockets. And then I just went around any raised bits to kind of accentuate them. And here I'm also going in to accentuate his cheekbones and the underside of his ears. At this point, I wasn't really sure how to paint him anymore, because again, all of the images we get, he has really strong lighting on him. And here I'm actually accentuating some grooves that he has in his horns that I did not sculpt. But I found it really hard to decide how to paint him, and I decided I would just have him look quite dramatic. What we just skipped over is that I added some black into his eye sockets as well to really darken them. You can see his eye sockets are very dark. We're darkening his armpits, and here you can see me realize that I totally forgot to have him have plating up to his shoulders. Oh well, at this point I just wanted to get it done. This was like 2 days ago from uploading. So yeah, I wasn't gonna give him more armor. I will just live with it. There's a lot of incongruity between the different art of him anyways. And here you can see that I'm putting this dark green in like all the sunken bits on his hands to accentuate the sculpting I did. Back to his armpits. Now we're painting the underside of his little feet. Like, this guy, he is a war criminal, but he's a fictional war criminal, and I'm turning him into a pretty princess. Or maybe not a pretty princess, but I get to be silly. His legs, what I'm scrolling through here, is that his legs have very little detail in a lot of the art, and that made it very hard for me to decide what to do with them. So I decided to just basically also not add very much detail. I'm painting the back dark green, and then the front gets to be a bit lighter green, and I add some texture, but I really didn't worry too much about the structure of them. And we're going down the grooves on his back. This was sculpted on top of the fabric with epoxy sculpt, and it was kind of hard to sculpt on top of fabric, but as soon as it cured, it was stuck there. And I'm painting the backs of his ears with a bit of a gradient, and then we're mixing another color. We're mixing a bright orange, and this is going to be on the wings. Some of the art has kind of the sun shining through his wings, and that looks really beautiful in my opinion. So I tried to emulate that by painting his wings. Later you'll see that I turn it into a bit of a gradient, but now I'm just going in with a bright orange, and then some of the art also matched that bright orange of his wings, of light shining through his wings, to all of his gold armor, and I thought that would look really amazing. And so I took inspiration, and I'm doing that same thing. Yeah, you can see that I kind of have to hold the chest piece on 2 fingers to paint it, because I'm scared of putting it on him and then getting all the paint on his body. Now I've mixed this also quite warm brown, and I'm just covering his wings with it to cover up that quite cool toned grayish brown that we had before. This is kind of the last layer of the wings. I add some more texture, but surprisingly enough, this covered it. And I started adding a lot of water to the paint, and that made it spread a lot further, yet it didn't dilute the color. There again is his face. And I haven't paid much attention to it, but my palette is an empty little carton of chocolate milk because the plastic doesn't let any of the paint seep through. Here I'm painting in his glowing green eyes. Yeah, using cartons that are going to go into trash anyway as a palette can work really quite well. The paint stayed wet quite well. I don't like stay wet palettes. Here I'm adding a lighter green to the eyes to make them really seem like they're glowing. But yeah, trash might make a really good painting palette. Here we're mixing a yellowy green and an orangey yellow together, and then a black to make this kind of muddy green to add some texture inside of his eye sockets. And then I'm mixing some white with that to go on top and add even more texture and also add some depth. I only added that towards the edges, and now I get to put some paint on the sculpting that I've done, and that was really satisfying, getting to see those shapes come forward. Now we're adding an even lighter color to the edges, and we're adding a little eye shine. Isn't he cute? And then I'm going in with some darker green to accentuate the shadows. This face up was a lot of just mixing darker and lighter colors and pushing the shapes and pushing the values and accentuating the sculpt, and then adding texture to make sure that pieces that didn't have too much detail didn't look flat. And painting around his mouth. I think his mouth looks quite silly. Here you can see I added a bit of a stripy detail to his forehead. The paints I'm using are the usual paints. They're Holbein acrylic wash, and then what's the name of that? Liquitex matte medium. And then I also often add some water to give the paints improved flowiness. Flow? I don't know. Here I'm painting these little pointy bits onto his chin. He has this texture in a lot of the pictures where he has this chin piece, and I just did my own version of it. I didn't sculpt it because I was worried it might not stay sturdy, and here I'm adding some green to make a bit more of a gradient. And I just really do keep going in with lighter and darker colors to also try and cover up as much of the orange underneath and the dark green, or to make a nice gradient between the dark green and the orange. Just really trying to accentuate any pieces that need accentuating and smooth out any bits that are a bit too harsh. And I've talked a lot with my partner about, like, why would Nicol Bolas be a fashion doll? Why does he have such long hair? Why doesn't he have his little orb between his horns? And the theory we've come up with is that within the lore, Nicol Bolas has been locked in this realm where he basically can't do anything and he can't escape. And in my version of this lore, he's found himself. He's calmed down, he's learned to meditate, he's grown out his hair, he's realized that all that's valuable in the world is that we care about each other, and now he has become a fashion doll with braidable hair. The Barbification of Nicol Bolas. You don't have to accept this lore, you can just look at the pretty doll that I made and admire his long, beautiful, shiny hair. But I think a big reason for me also that I came up with this lore for him is I, for some reason, really attached to his name and his design. I thought he was a really funky guy, especially some of the older cards in which he looks very much like a creature and a bit more like a dragon with the face of a man, which I feel like he looks like quite a bit, especially in later artworks, but also in my doll. Like, that's almost a dude. It's okay, mostly he looks like a gremlin, but I wanted to make a doll out of him. I had an idea for these dolls that I had doubles of, and then I got really excited and I looked up all of these lore videos for Nicol Bolas, and I found out that he's actually horrible, so horrible that they locked him away. And so I had to make it a bit silly and disconnect from all this horrible stuff to still be able to enjoy working on him. I don't love the idea of making a doll of a really horrible character when there's already so many horrible things going on in the world. So this Nicol Bolas found himself, is kind, grew out his hair, and maybe he likes roller skating. Maybe he likes going to the park. I don't know. Give me your rehabilitated Nicol Bolas headcanons. Yeah. Where are we in the painting process? Still using yellowy greens. Oh, this is actually exciting. I'm going in with my brush and just doing really quite small flicky motions down each of the scales down his chest, and leaving some space in between for the orange to shine through, for the really dark green shadows to still be there. And I was really excited at this point because I really felt like the underpainting I had done was actually working, and I thought it came together really well. Also on his face, you can see that I did all these kind of swirly lines to cover up pieces where I wasn't really sure what to paint. There's not a lot of detail shots of what's happening in his ears, and the sculpting there is quite smooth. So I just added these swirly lines to give some movement and connect it all together. And same thing with the horns, where there's these grooves that I didn't sculpt. I just kind of patted on the paint and blurred it out and added lines to suggest detail, but not necessarily leave me sitting here painting this doll for 10 hours. Because I think I did paint him for 10 hours yesterday, but yeah, I didn't want to be painting unnecessary things, and I think this works well enough. And yeah, I think I left in quite a lot of clips of this because I was so proud of how well it worked. But I just, slowly worked down his chest with little lines of paint. And doesn't his face look crazy? I feel so proud of how his face came out. I wasn't sure it was going to come out this good while painting him, while sculpting him. And now looking at him, it's just, I feel really accomplished. Amber Dolls on Instagram, she said that he's like the final boss of my works in progress. And that's really true. This is the most complicated, convoluted, detailed doll that I have ever made. And I started making him like a year ago, which was very early in my customizing progress. Like, I think in the last year I've come very far and gained a lot of confidence. And I started him before I had any of that confidence or any of that knowledge. And he's got so many moving parts, and I just this really feels like the final boss of my works in progress, and it really feels like I've proven myself a bit of I can do this. And I probably will just return to doing pretty anthropomorphic girls, because that's really, I think, what I find the most fun to make. But I do feel really, really accomplished. I beat the final boss. I did it. Yay. Yeah. I'm still working down his chest. You can see the difference between the unpainted scales and the painted scales. I think it's really just amazing that it works so well. And now you can also see there's around the elbow and the shoulder, there's little bits where the paint is rubbed off and Deuce's original color is coming through. And I think you can see quite well that it doesn't look too out of place next to the color of the scales, I feel like, at least, and that I'm really glad about. One of the trickiest things with this doll is the fact that he was so large and he had so many moving pieces that it was really hard to still reach all the parts. Like you can see here, I had to put his arms up, to make sure that I could reach there, but also while painting the base color, I had to like put him upside down to make sure I didn't miss a spot. And I think that's something that I maybe could have prepared for a little better, but I also think with the fact that this was one of the first big body modification dolls that I decided to start working on, I also do think that it's, you know, it's just like something that I've learned now along the way. I see a lot of people who attach their doll wings with hinges so that they're easier to just screw on at the end, and I think that's really clever and probably a lot easier to paint and work with. But I also really like the way that his spikes on his back connect to his wings so seamlessly. So I think, you know, it's like the trouble is part of the process. Here, I want to get back to the footage we're watching. You can see that I'm painting like little green bits onto his chest, onto the lines that I painted before, just to give him some more texture and color variation. And at this point, I think I stopped filming as much of the process because it was just taking so long, and it was really hard to get his whole form on video, even because he's so large. So sorry if you get a bit motion sick here, but here I'm going in with quite a wiry, thick brush, and I'm just adding texture to his arms and his legs because I just painted them green, basically, and I didn't want them to seem too flat. And I didn't want to paint on scales either, because then you gotta think of the direction of the scales and how do they work together. So I'm just taking a bit of a yellowy green color and dabbing on some texture and then smoothing it out with my finger, and yeah, just making sure he doesn't look so flat. And at this point, what I also started doing is I have a couple of these granny squares that I crocheted with just really thick cotton yarn, and I put one of them on the table to lay him on so that the table wouldn't scratch off any of his texture, any of his paint. And now you can also see what I also did to add some texture is add some lines to some of his parts. I think I did it to his shoulders and his arms. I maybe did some on the knees, I think I did some on his hips. And that's again to just try and suggest detail where there isn't really a lot of it, and to add visual interest without adding hours and hours of painting time. And I think at this point he's starting to look so cool. His hands, you can see I added these little lines. And now what I also did is I made these intentional folds in his wings and then held it together with a little rubber band to try and see if his wings could fold up a bit nicer than they did before, which was they would just fold in half. And now I'm starting to work on the gradient with some green paint. I painted into the folds, and then I also painted the rest of the edges, and that's how it looks like now. I think it's so funny with his arms up. He's like, pick me up, uppies. I know that he's like a horrible character, but I just think it's so funny that he's just like, pick me up. Like, that's what babies look at you from the changing table. Now we're adding some texture to the back, with some green. You can see that the brown still shines through, but I think that color variation is nice. And now you can see his knees chipped really bad. So I went in and covered that up with some dark green paint. And then also I went in again, I think earlier already, with the wood glue again on his torso and his face after I finished painting. And it really dries matte, and it makes me feel a lot more secure about the lifespan of the paint, and it doesn't have any solvents in it, so I hope it will be fine. I think it should be fine. Yeah. Some wood glues really turn yellow, but this one I've been working with for a while, so I know that it's not the type of glue to do that in a short amount of time, at least. We'll see about multiple years. And what I'm also doing, his ankles also chipped, so I'm also making sure to get some paint on his ankles, or like the back of Toralai's knees. How convoluted. I also don't think this just looks so funny. It looks so silly. He's getting his little Pete's painted. I can't help that I hyperfixated on nickel bolus, but I can be silly about it. Here you can see, I painted his tail and I left it up like that to dry so that it wouldn't rub off on anything. And then I painted in the lines, kind of following the spikes on his tail. And now we're doing the same thing that I did on his body. I'm going in with these light greenish lines, and I'm just leaving a little edge at the top to add some detail. And I'm going in with the second one. I think this is a bit of a brighter green to add more visual interest again and some variation and texture. And I'm still using the same little chocolate milk carton for mixing paint. So recycle your trash, guys. Now I've added in some orange along the top edge to try and emulate the dark orange that we had on his chest. And you can see in the back I was watching a Morgstalls video. And at this point, oh, isn't he looking so good? This was late at night. This was like midnight, and I was trying to finish him. Now on the gold plating, I'm adding these dark brown lines to kind of give some shape and an idea of some sculpting that there is, which isn't there. I don't know if my sentence structure makes sense anymore. Now I've added some highlights on any protruding parts and also next to the shadows to again give an idea of texture and shape, because I sculpted it with foam clay, which isn't very textured, but you know, we can pretend. And then I added some white highlights to really add some contrast, and I think this looks great. And then I added some gloss varnish, and look at the gap. At this point, I've also put one last layer of wood glue on his wings to really protect that paint. And now it's time to take out his glorious, glorious hair. You can also see here how I again have some rubber bands around his wings to make sure that they stay in the folds I want them to be in. This does leave like slight little marks in the foam clay, but because the foam clay is quite textured, it doesn't really bother me. And look at his glorious hair. Soon I am going to grab a little Monster High brush. Oh, yeah, here we go. This is the one that comes with the Claudine Creep production. It's the only doll hair brush that I have. And I know you're not supposed to use plastic brushes on plastic hair, like they damage each other, but I don't brush the hair that often, so I'm not stressing about it for now. And just, this was my favorite part. This made it all worth it. The nights of working on him. Yesterday I worked on him until like nearly 1 a.m. at night, trying to get him done in time. I don't condone this behavior, but I really was so excited to get him done in time. And I haven't been able to touch his hair in weeks at this point because I had to keep it safe while sculpting and painting him. And so it was really like a reward. It's like a reward getting to brush his hair and give him a little trim. I don't think I trimmed the hair when I finished his reboot at first, so it was way overdue. And at first I trimmed like the sticky outy bits off, and then I twisted his hair up and just chopped at it a bit to give it a bit of variation. And it has these little waves in it because it's been in a braid the whole time, like curled up on his head. And I think the beachy waves are really funny and cute. And yeah, he doesn't stand on a stand very well, so now you can kind of see the purple pipe cleaner I've secured him onto the stand with. Or you could see it earlier, you can't really see it right now. And I hope you're so excited to see the vinyl reveal. I am, for you to see the vinyl reveal now. Thank you so much for watching this ridiculously long video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you liked seeing all of these projects come to fruition. I hope I helped you get some of your projects done while watching. If you did work on your project while watching this video, please let me know in the comments what you were working on. I'd love to hear. I myself feel quite fulfilled that I was able to get this wide of a scope of projects done, and if you're struggling to have a ton of random works in progress done, I'd highly recommend setting yourself a challenge like this, trying to get them all done. The way that I got myself to get these projects done is that I set myself a hard line. I said, before these projects are done, you're not allowed to start on anything else. And now that I've gotten them done, look forward to new videos on my channel soon. Not only am I planning to make a collection tour, but I also have 4 new projects in the works. I hope you'll be back. I hope you enjoyed. Let me move Una out of the way, just so you can get a look at this very random collection of dolls. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know which was your favorite project to watch. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.